Good afternoon, YouTube, and welcome to the Pipe Report. Before I begin the article, just an announcement. Tomorrow I will be doing a collaboration. It's on Skype though, so it will not be a live Google Hangout, but collaboration with the man who refused to die. And when you see him, you'll see why it's really interesting. I guess his story is pretty intense, so we're going to go over that, but I am excited for that, so we will be doing that tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Time, so it should be uploaded on YouTube and Patreon and all the other websites I use, probably around 3:30, 4 o'clock, so look forward to that. Anyways, let's get to the article. So the U.S. court allows part of Trump travel ban to go into effect. My thing with this is that I'm still shocked that we are still debating this. It is common knowledge. I mean, you can read in the Constitution that the president has control over the safety of Americans with regards to immigration. Obama did it too. Travel restrictions are in the purview of the president because it is his job to protect Americans. But they being the left and judges, especially in the Ninth Circuit Court, they were using Trump's rhetoric during the campaign as the basis for trying to argue that his restriction, his travel ban, if you want to call it, is actually a Muslim ban, which is nonsensical because 85% of Muslim-majority nations are still free to enter the U.S. I'm talking about when he first is his travel ban, 85%. So you cannot claim it's a Muslim ban when 85% of the world Muslims are allowed to enter the U.S., but they use that. And they even used, what's his name? He was the mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani. They used some of his rhetoric too to try to determine Trump's motive behind the immigration ban. I kid you not. They used someone else's rhetoric and said that was Trump's rhetoric. So the Ninth Circuit is just, 8 out of 10 of their cases are overturned by the Supreme Court. They are the most liberal court in the country, by far, and they are one of the most powerful courts in the country as well. Anyways, I digress. A U.S. appeals court in California on Monday let part of Trump's latest travel ban go into effect, ruling that the government can bar entry of people from 6 Muslim-majority countries if they have no connections to the U.S. A 3-judge panel of the San Francisco-based Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals partially granted a Trump administration request to block, at least temporarily, a judge's ruling that had put the new ban on hold. Trump's ban was announced on September 24th and replaced 2 previous versions that had been impeded by federal courts. The action means the ban will apply to people from Iran, Libya, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, and Chad who do not have connections to the U.S. Now, all of these countries, maybe except for Chad, no, I think Chad's on there are on the Global Terrorism Index. And the Global Terrorism Index is a nonpartisan group that determines the biggest hotspots in the world regarding terrorism. So Iraq is in there, Afghanistan is in there, Syria is in there, and Nigeria. And this group, that is the Global Terrorism Index, discovered that countries with the most terrorism are composed with a Muslim majority. So it's not racism to assume that these countries, although they have Muslim majority citizens, do obtain terrorism, are full of terrorism. The studies are there. So it's hard to argue that these countries are strictly being stopped because they are Muslim majority nations when you can actually look at the Global Terrorism Index and discover, yes, even though these are Muslim majority nations, these also have some of the highest terrorism counts in their countries. Those connections are defined as family relationships and former documented relationships with U.S.-based entities such as universities and resettlement agencies. Those with family relationships that would allow entry include grandparents, grandchildren, brothers-in-law, sisters-in-law, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, and cousins of people in the U.S. The ruling does not affect people from two other countries listed in Trump's ban, North Korea and Venezuela. The state of Hawaii, which sued to block the restrictions, argued that the federal immigration law did not give Trump the authority to impose them on 6 of those countries. U.S. District Judge Derek Watson in Honolulu ruled last month that Hawaii was likely to succeed with that argument. It makes no sense. It's in the Constitution. It is in the Constitution. Especially in times of war, Trump could stop all immigration to the U.S. That is in his job description. To protect U.S. citizens, he is allowed to do that. But since they cannot let Trump do anything he wants, they're always out to get him. Whatever he does is automatically deemed racist and bigoted and demagoguery and everything like that. And that's the same reason why he's having trouble getting legislation passed in Congress. Because Congress, there's two main reasons why Congress are obstructing him. The first one is that they just don't like him. They hate the man so much that they do not want him to succeed at all. The second one is it's more political. If they can prevent the Republicans and Trump from achieving any legislation victories, then they have more of an incentive in the midterms to get voters to vote for them. For instance, next year they could say, look, Republicans had both houses of Congress and the presidency, and they got nothing done. No legislation was passed, blah, blah, blah. And they could use that. And people are like, you know what, you're right. We voted them in, and they didn't do anything. Let's go another direction. Likewise, in 2020, if Trump does decide to run again, they could say, see, even though Trump said all this stuff, he didn't get anything done, no legislation was passed, blah, blah, blah. So their motives are political as well. They hate Trump, that's the first one. The second one is political. They want the majority back in Congress. They want a Democrat as president in 2020. So they will do whatever they can to stop Trump. But I think most of the people see this. I mean, I just said this right now, but even if I didn't say this, I'm sure many of you who are watching this video, you could probably deduce that yourself. You probably say, well, that's obviously why they're doing that. They hate Trump and they don't want him to succeed. I think most people see this, and I think that this might come back to bite the Democrats also. But we'll have to see what happens. It all depends on whether or not the GOP can get tax reform through. They have to get tax reform through, and I believe they will. I believe we will see tax legislation happening this year. All right, where's I at? We'll start here. Trump has said the travel ban is needed to protect the U.S. from terrorism by Muslim militants. As a candidate, Trump had promised a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. Critics of the travel ban in its various iterations call it a Muslim ban that violates the U.S. Constitution by discriminating on the basis of religion. The Ninth Circuit is due to hear oral arguments in the case on December 6. In a parallel case from Maryland, a judge also ruled against the Trump administration and partially blocked the ban from going into effect. An appeal in the Maryland case is being heard on December 8th by the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond, Virginia. The Maryland case was brought by the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, which represents several advocacy groups, including the International Refugee Assistance Project. In announcing the newest travel restrictions, the White House had portrayed them as necessary consequences for countries that did not meet new requirements for vetting of immigrants and issuing of visas. Those requirements were shared in July with foreign governments, which had 50 days to make improvements if needed, the White House said. A number of countries made improvements by enhancing the security of travel documents or the reporting of passports that were lost or stolen, the administration has said. Others did not, sparking the restrictions. The DOJ and Hawaii state officials could not immediately be reached for comment. So, my main thing is that I'm not necessarily sure that I agree with the travel ban. I honestly don't know if I agree with it or not. I don't know if it will actually help. However, Trump has every right to do this. Whether I agree with it or not is irrelevant. It is under his powers. He has the power to do so as defined in the U.S. Constitution. trying to negate him from doing so is people that are trying to violate the Constitution. And me, as a constitutionalist, I am against that. The Constitution and the Declaration of Independence are two of the most brilliant documents that were ever created in the history of the world. And when people try to deny and bypass both of them, it irritates me. If we just follow the Constitution, our country would get back on track. Our country would be better. But those in power, Congress, Obama, the presidency, doesn't matter. They always want to do more than they are allowed to. And usually they do so under the guise of some false premise. For example, the Patriot Act was passed to protect us from terrorism. Yet it completely violates our Fourth Amendment and our rights and liberties as defined under the Constitution. So I was against the Patriot Act, and I'm against this this new act they're trying to come out with. I forgot the name. Holly Seeliger and I talked about it, and 40 Ounce and I talked about it as well, but I cannot remember the name. I'm sorry, but it's a new one coming out that it tries to basically revamp the NSA's upstream and prison program, which allowed the government to spy on American citizens, and it gave it a name where it's like, I can't remember what it is. I think it might be the Liberty Act, I think it might be called. And it's complete opposite of liberty. But anyways, I am digressing pretty badly here, so I will stop the video now. But again, Trump has every right to do this, and the Ninth Circuit Court gets 8 out of 10 of their rulings overturned by the Supreme Court. They are the most liberal court, so you will expect to see a lot of, not really controversy, but a lot of arguments going back and forth between the court and the DOJ and the ACLU and things of that nature. So this is far from over, but this is just an update of what has happened so far. And I'm done.